Dr. Lisa Martinez checked her watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. The numbers glowed red against the dark metal surface. 7:47 a.m. Her child care provider, Mrs. Coleman, was supposed to arrive at 7:30. Lisa had tried calling 3 times, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. Danny called from his bed in the next room. The sound was wet and harsh, the kind that made Lisa's chest tighten with worry. Her 8-year-old son had been fighting this flu for 3 days. Now, his fever had broken during the night, but he was still too sick for school. "Mom?" Danny's voice was small and scratchy. "Is Mrs. Coleman coming today?" Lisa walked to his doorway and forced a smile. Danny looked tiny under his blue blanket, his dark hair messy from sleep. His cheeks were still flushed, but his eyes were clearer than they had been yesterday. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. She might be running late." But even as she said it, Lisa knew Mrs. Coleman wasn't coming. The older woman was always punctual. If she was this late without calling, something had happened. Lisa's communication device buzzed. She grabbed it quickly, hoping to see Mrs. Coleman's name on the screen. Instead, she found a message from her neighbor. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Coleman fell yesterday evening and broke her hip. She's in the hospital. I just heard from her daughter. Hope you can find someone else to help with Danny." Lisa stared at the message, her stomach dropping. Today was the most important day of her research project at the Galactic Research Institute. After months of preparation, the alien microorganisms from the Kepler system were finally ready for the critical analysis phase. The samples had cost the Institute millions of credits to obtain, and the research window was tiny. If they missed today, they would have to wait another 6 months for the organisms to reach the right stage of development. She quickly scrolled through her contacts, calling every babysitter and child care service she knew. One by one, they all gave her the same answer. No one was available on such short notice. Danny appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in his blanket. "Mom, you look worried." Lisa knelt down to his level. "I'm just trying to figure out who can stay with you today while I go to work." "I feel a little better," Danny said, though his voice was still rough. "Maybe I could come with you?" Lisa's first instinct was to say no. The Galactic Research Institute had strict rules about unauthorized people in the labs. But as she looked at her son's hopeful face, she realized she was running out of options. She could call in sick, but that would mean disappointing her entire team and possibly losing months of work. "Danny, you know my work is very important today, right?" He nodded seriously. "The space germs." Lisa almost smiled despite her stress. Danny had always been fascinated by her work. She had explained her research in simple terms, telling him about the tiny living things they found on other planets. He called them space germs, which wasn't exactly wrong. "If you come with me, you have to promise to be very quiet and stay exactly where I tell you to stay. Can you do that?" Danny's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? I can see the space germs?" "You can't see them without special equipment, but you can see the lab where we study them. Do you promise to be good?" "I promise, Mom. I'll be the best kid ever." An hour later, Lisa walked through the main entrance of the Galactic Research Institute with Danny's small hand in hers. The building was massive, all white walls and gleaming floors. Their footsteps echoed as they walked toward the elevators. "Wow," Danny whispered, staring up at the high ceiling. "It's like a space castle." Other researchers nodded politely as they passed. Most of them knew Lisa well. She had worked at the Institute for 5 years and had built a reputation as one of their most dedicated scientists. A few people looked curiously at Danny, but no one said anything. The elevator carried them up to the 10th floor, where the high-security labs were located. Lisa badged them through 3 different security checkpoints, each time explaining that Danny was her son and would be staying in the observation area. "Dr. Martinez," called a voice behind them. Lisa turned to see Dr. Robert Kane, the Institute director, walking toward them with his usual stern expression. "Director Kane," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is my son, Danny." Kane looked down at Danny with cold eyes. "Dr. Martinez, you know the rules about unauthorized personnel in restricted areas." "I understand, sir, but I have." "A child care emergency. Danny will stay in the observation room the entire time. He won't interfere with the research." Kane's expression didn't change. "The rules exist for a reason. These organisms are potentially dangerous, and we're dealing with equipment worth millions of credits." "Please, Director Kane, this research can't wait, and I have no other options today." Kane studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But he stays in the observation room, and this cannot happen again." "Thank you, sir. I understand." Lisa led Danny to the observation room, which was separated from the main lab by thick glass walls. She set up a comfortable chair for him and gave him a tablet loaded with educational games. "Remember what you promised," she said, kissing his forehead. "Stay right here, okay?" "I will, Mom. Go save the universe with your space germs." Lisa smiled and walked through the airlock into the main laboratory. The space was filled with advanced equipment that hummed and glowed with various colored lights. Her team of 4 other researchers was already at work, preparing the samples for analysis. For the next 3 hours, everything went perfectly. The microorganisms were responding exactly as their models had predicted. Lisa felt the familiar thrill of discovery as they uncovered new information about how these alien life forms function docked through the glass wall. She could see Danny in his chair, quietly playing on his tablet. He looked up occasionally and waved at her, making her smile even in the middle of complex calculations. But then Danny stood up from his chair. Lisa watched as he walked closer to the glass wall, pressing his face against it to get a better look at the equipment. She gestured for him to sit back down, and he nodded and returned to his chair. 20 minutes later, Lisa looked up from her microscope to check on Danny again. The observation room was empty. Her heart stopped. "Danny?" She ran to the observation room, but he wasn't there. Panic filled her chest as she realized he must have somehow gotten into the main lab area. "Danny!" she called out louder. "Mom!" His voice came from behind one of the large analysis machines. "Look at this!" Lisa ran around the equipment and found Danny standing next to the main computer console. His small finger was pointing at a big red button that was now flashing. "I wanted to see what this did," he said innocently. The containment alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed throughout the lab as the automated system activated emergency protocols. All the samples were immediately sealed in protective containers, and the room began its decontamination sequence. Lisa's teammates looked at her with shocked expressions. Dr. Susan Blake, the team leader, shook her head in disbelief. "The containment protocol," Blake said quietly. "All of today's work is lost." Lisa pulled Danny close to her, her hands shaking. The samples were safe and no one was hurt, but the research had been completely disrupted. Months of preparation were gone in an instant. Director Kane's voice came over the intercom, cold and final. "Dr. Martinez, please report to my office immediately. Bring your son." As Lisa walked toward Kane's office with Danny's hand in hers, she already knew what was coming. The rules were clear, and there would be no exceptions this time. Her career at the Galactic Research Institute was over. 3 months had passed since Lisa lost her job at the Galactic Research Institute. She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at another rejection letter on her tablet screen. The words blurred together as she read them for the 3rd time. "We appreciate your interest in our research position. However, after careful review of your employment history, we have decided to move forward with other candidates." It was the same message she had received from 12 other companies in the past month. Her termination record followed her everywhere like a shadow. No major research facility would hire someone who had violated security protocols, even if the violation had been an accident caused by an 8-year-old boy. Danny walked into the kitchen, his school backpack still on his shoulders. At 8 years old, he was smart enough to notice when his mother was upset. Another no? He asked quietly. Lisa closed the tablet and tried to smile. It's okay, sweetheart. Something will come up. But even as she said it, Lisa wasn't sure she believed it anymore. Her savings were almost gone. The small apartment they lived in was cheap, but even cheap cost money. She had started looking at jobs outside of science completely. Maybe she could teach at a local school or work in a regular office somewhere. Mom, Danny said, sitting down across from her. I'm sorry I pushed that button. I didn't mean to make you lose your job. Lisa's heart broke a little. They had talked about this many times, but Danny still blamed himself for what happened. She reached across the table and took his small hand in hers. Danny, listen to me. What happened was not your fault. You were curious, and that's normal. The grown-up should have been more careful about keeping you safe and keeping the lab safe. 2. But if you hadn't pushed the button, something else might have happened someday. The important thing is that nobody got hurt, and we're going to be okay. Danny nodded, but she could see he still felt guilty. That evening, after Danny went to bed, Lisa sat in her living room looking through job listings on her tablet. Most of the positions were far below her qualifications, but she was running out of choices. She was about to apply for a data entry job when her tablet chimed with a new message. The sender was listed as Stellar Dynamics Corporation. Lisa had never heard of the company before. She opened the message and read it carefully. Dr. Martinez, we have reviewed your research background and are impressed by your work in xenobiology. We would like to offer you an interview for a senior research position with our team. Please respond if you are interested in discussing this opportunity. Lisa stared at the message in confusion. She had not applied to any company called Stellar Dynamics. How had they even gotten her contact information? And why would they want to interview someone who had been fired for a security violation? She quickly searched for information about Stellar Dynamics on the global network. The company was relatively new, only 3 years old. Their website showed pictures of advanced research facilities and talked about revolutionary approaches to interspecies cooperation. The projects they described sounded incredibly ambitious, almost too good to be true. Most of the established research institutions had never heard of Stellar Dynamics. The few mentions Lisa found were dismissive, calling the company overly optimistic. Dreamers and amateurs trying to solve problems that real scientists have worked on for decades. But Lisa was in no position to be picky. She sent a reply accepting the interview offer. 2 days later, she found herself sitting in her living room, waiting for a hologram call from someone identified only as Director Chun. Danny was at school, so she had the apartment to herself. At exactly 2 o'clock, the hologram projector activated. The image that appeared was fuzzy at first, then cleared to show a figure sitting at a desk. The person was backlit, making it hard to see their face clearly. Dr. Martinez, the voice said. Warmly, it sounded like a man, probably middle-aged. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you for considering me, Lisa replied. I have to admit, I'm curious about how you found me. I didn't apply to Stellar Dynamics. We have been following your work for some time. Your research on alien microorganisms has been very impressive. We believe you will be a valuable addition to our team. Lisa felt a flutter of hope. It had been so long since anyone had said anything positive about her work. I should mention, she said carefully, that I was terminated from my last position due to a security incident. I want to be honest about that. There was a pause. Lisa expected Director Chun to end the interview right there, the way so many others had. Instead, he said, We are aware of the circumstances of your termination. Could you tell me more about what happened? Lisa took a deep breath and explained about Danny being sick, about Mrs. Coleman's accident, about having no childcare options. She told him about bringing Danny to work and how he had accidentally triggered the containment protocol. So you chose to risk your career rather than abandon your research team on a critical day, Director Chun said when she finished. I suppose you could look at it that way, Lisa said. though it didn't work out very well? And you brought your son to work because you had no other way to care for him while he was ill. Yes, I know it was against the rules, but I couldn't leave him alone when he was sick. Another pause. Then Director Chun said something that surprised her completely. Dr. Martinez, that tells me everything I need to know about your character. You put your responsibilities as both a scientist and a mother above your own job security. That is exactly the kind of person we need at Stellar Dynamics. Lisa blinked in surprise. I'm sorry, what? You're hired, Director Chun said simply. If you're willing to accept the position. I don't understand. Don't you want to know more about my qualifications? My research experience? We already know about your qualifications. They're impressive, but qualifications aren't enough for what we're trying to accomplish here. We need people who understand that science isn't just about following rules and procedures. It's about caring enough to take risks for something bigger than yourself. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. After months of rejection, someone was finally giving her a chance. What kind of research would I be doing? She asked. We're working on projects that the established institutions think are impossible, Director Chun said. Universal translation protocols that work with any alien. Language. Medical treatments that can help multiple species at once. Research teams where humans and aliens work together as equals instead of just cooperating when it's convenient. It sounded too good to be true, but Lisa found herself wanting to believe it. Where's the research facility located? She asked. Our main station orbits Proxima Centauri. It's a beautiful location, and we've designed it to be comfortable for families. There are living quarters for researchers and their children, educational facilities, recreational areas. We believe that good science happens when people can bring their whole lives to their work, not just the parts that fit into neat categories. Lisa's breath caught. Families? Dr. Martinez, we will be delighted to have both you and your son join our team. Danny would have access to some of the best educational opportunities in the galaxy, and you would never have to choose between being a scientist and being a mother. For the first time in months, Lisa felt genuine hope blooming in her chest. When would you need an answer? She asked. Take all the time you need, Director Chun said. But I hope you'll say yes. I have a feeling you're going to do incredible things here. After the call ended, Lisa sat in her quiet living room, staring at the space where the hologram had been. Everything about Stellar Dynamics seemed too perfect, too good to be true. But maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where being human wasn't seen as a weakness. When Danny came home from school that afternoon, Lisa was waiting for him with a smile. How would you like to live on a space station? She asked. Danny's eyes went wide with excitement. Really? With real spaceships and everything? Really, Lisa said, pulling him into a hug. And this time, nobody will mind if you're curious about how things work. The transport ship slowly approached the Stellar Dynamics Research Station, and Lisa pressed her face to the small window beside her seat. The station was nothing like she had expected. Instead of the cold, metal boxes that most space facilities looked like, this one was elegant and curved, with sections that looked almost like neighborhoods connected by graceful bridges. Mom, look, Danny said from the seat next to her, his nose also pressed against the window. It looks like a city. In space, Lisa had to agree. The station was enormous, easily 10 times larger than any research facility she had ever seen. Lights twinkled in windows throughout the structure, and she could see gardens visible through transparent sections. It looked more like a place where people lived than a place where they just worked. The docking process was smooth and quiet. When they finally stepped off the transport, Lisa was amazed by what she saw. The docking bay was bright and welcoming, with real plants growing in planters. Along the walls, children's artwork was displayed on bulletin boards, and she could hear the distant sound of laughter echoing from somewhere deeper in the station. Dr. Martinez, a young woman with short brown hair, approached them with a friendly smile. I'm Kate Wilson, your orientation coordinator. Welcome to Stellar Dynamics. Kate looked to be in her 20s, wearing a casual jumpsuit instead of the formal lab coats Lisa was used to seeing at research facilities. She knelt down to Danny's level and extended her hand. And you must be Danny? I've heard a lot about you. Are you excited to see your new home? Danny shook her hand seriously. Is it true there are other kids here? Oh, yes, Kate said with a grin. Lots of them. In fact, there's a welcome party planned for this afternoon where you can meet some of them. As Kate led them through the station, Lisa's amazement only grew. The corridors were wide and bright, with high ceilings that made the space feel open and airy. They passed a school where she could see human children learning alongside young aliens from several different species. Further on, they walked by a park area with real trees and a small playground where families were having picnics. This is incredible, Lisa said to Kate. How is all of this possible? The cost must be enormous, Kate smiled. Director Chun believes that good science comes from happy people. When researchers don't have to worry about their families or feel like they're missing out on life, they do better work. It turns out that investing in quality of life actually saves money in the long run because people are more productive and creative. They stopped at a residential section where Kate showed them to their new quarters. Lisa had expected a small, cramped space like the apartments most space stations provided for workers. Instead, she found herself looking at a comfortable two-bedroom home with a living area, kitchen, and even a small balcony that looked out at the stars. This is where we're going to live, Danny asked, running to the window. We can see space from our house. It's beautiful, Lisa said, still hardly believing it was real. When do I start work? Director Chun would like to meet with you tomorrow. Morning, Kate said. But for today, just settle in and explore. There's a community center on level 12 where families gather in the evenings. I think you'll find people here are very friendly. That evening, Lisa and Danny made their way to the community center. The space was warm and inviting, with comfortable seating areas and tables where families were eating dinner together. What struck Lisa most was how relaxed everyone seemed. At the Galactic Research Institute, scientists had always been serious and formal. Here, she saw researchers laughing with their children, playing games, and just enjoying each other's company. Danny quickly found a group of kids to play with, including two young aliens whose species Lisa didn't recognize. She watched in amazement as they all played together, the language barriers seeming to disappear as they communicated through gestures and shared laughter. Dr. Martinez, a tall man with gray hair, approached her table. I'm Dr. Alex Carter. I heard you're joining our xenobiology team. Yes, Lisa said, standing to shake his hand. I have to say, this place is unlike anything I've ever seen. It takes some getting used to, Alex agreed, sitting down across from her. I came here from the Titan Research Complex 3 years ago. Back there, I barely saw my wife and daughter because of the work schedule. Here, I have dinner with my family every night and still manage to do the best research of my career. How? Is that possible? Lisa asked. Director Chun figured out something that the other institutions never understood, Alex said. Scientists aren't machines. We're people with families and lives and emotions. When you try to separate those things from the work, you don't get better science. You get burned out scientists who eventually stop caring. Lisa thought about her old job, where she had often worked 60-hour weeks and rarely saw Danny except to tuck him into bed. What kind of research are you working on here? Right now, I'm part of a team developing a universal medical scanner that can work on any known species, Alex said. The breakthrough came when we realized that we needed to think about medicine the way different species think about caring for their families. It sounds simple, but no one had tried that approach before. That's amazing, Lisa said. Who is Director Chun? I spoke with him during my interview, but I've never met him in person. Alex smiled mysteriously. You'll meet him tomorrow. I think you'll find the meeting very interesting. The next morning, Lisa made her way to the director's office. The receptionist, a friendly alien with blue skin and large eyes, smiled at her and gestured toward a door marked Director Chun. Lisa knocked and heard a familiar voice say, "Come in." She opened the door and stepped inside, then stopped completely. The man sitting behind the desk was human, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and kind eyes. But what made her freeze was not his appearance. It was the way he smiled at her, a smile she had seen before, but in a much younger face. "Hello, Dr. Martinez," he said, standing up from his desk. "I believe you remember me, though I was quite a bit smaller the last time we met." Lisa stared at him, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. The face was older, more mature, but the eyes were the same. The same curious, intelligent eyes that had looked up at her in the laboratory 3 months ago. "Danny?" she whispered. "Not quite," the man said with a gentle laugh, "but close. My name is David Chen, though my friends used to call me Danny when I was 8 years old." Lisa's legs felt weak, and she grabbed the back of a chair for support. "I don't understand. How is this possible?" David gestured for her to sit down, then took the chair across from her. "Time travel isn't involved, if that's what you're thinking. I know this is confusing, so let me explain." Lisa nodded, still staring at him in shock. 27 years ago, when I was 8 years old and sick with the flu, my mother brought me to work at the Galactic Research Institute because our babysitter had an accident. I was curious about the laboratory equipment, and I pushed a button that triggered a containment protocol. My mother lost her job because of that incident. "But that was Danny," Lisa said weakly. "My Danny, 3 months ago?" "No," David said gently. "That was me 27 years ago. The woman who brought me to work that day was Dr. Lisa Martinez, a brilliant xenobiologist who chose to risk her career rather than abandon her responsibilities to her team or leave her sick son alone at home." Lisa felt like the room was spinning. "This doesn't make sense. If you're that boy, then where is my Danny now?" David's expression became sad. "Dr. Martinez, I think there's been some confusion. Your Danny is at school right now, here on the station. He's the same age he was when you brought him to my interview yesterday. But I am also that Danny, just 27 years older." "I don't understand," Lisa said again. David leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Lisa, when you lost your job for bringing me to work, it changed everything. Not just for you, but for me too. I grew up watching my mother struggle to find work because she had put her child's needs first. I saw how the scientific community punished her for showing basic human compassion." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "I decided that when I grew up, I would build a different kind of research facility. A place where being a good parent and being a good scientist weren't competing goals. We're human. Values like love and family were seen as strengths, not weaknesses." Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes as understanding began to dawn. Stellar dynamics. "Everything I learned about what was wrong with the scientific establishment, I learned from watching what happened to you," David said, turning back to face her. "You sacrificed your career for your child and for your team. That taught me that the most important discoveries come from people who care deeply about something beyond themselves. So you built all of this because ... double quotes Lisa's voice trailed off. "Because a brilliant scientist once showed an 8-year-old boy that sometimes the most human response is also the most important one," David finished. "Dr. Martinez, I brought you here not just because you're an excellent researcher, but because you're the person who taught me that science and humanity don't have to be separate things." Lisa sat in silence for a long moment, trying to absorb everything she had heard. Finally, she looked up at David, seeing both the man he had become and the curious boy she remembered. Lisa spent her first week at Stellar Dynamics in a state of constant amazement. Every day brought new surprises about how different this place was from any research facility she had ever seen. The work itself was incredible, but it was the way. People worked together that truly shocked her. On her third day, she was assigned to a project team that included Dr. Sarah Kim, a human biochemist, along with Zetka, a tall blue alien from the Altarian system, and Unit 7742, a mechanical being, whose species called themselves the Assembly. Lisa had worked with aliens before, but always in very formal, careful settings, where everyone followed strict protocols about how to interact. Here, things were completely different. Sarah, could you pass me that data pad? Zefka asked during their morning meeting. His voice came through a translation device, but somehow it sounded warm and friendly rather than mechanical. Sure thing, Sarah said, handing it over. How's your daughter doing with her math homework, by the way? Lisa blinked in surprise. Zefka had a daughter? And Sarah knew about her homework? She is struggling with geometric concepts, Zefka replied. Perhaps your son could help her? I understand human children learn these subjects differently. I'll ask Jake tonight, Sarah said. He loves math puzzles. Unit 7742's optical sensors glowed brighter, which Lisa had learned was the equivalent of a smile for his species. My research efficiency increases by 12% when I observe positive social interactions between teammates, he said in his precise electronic voice. Lisa looked around the table at her new teammates. Do you all know each other's families? Of course, Sarah said. We have dinner together most Friday nights. Our kids all play together, and Zetka makes this amazing soup from his home planet. It aids in digestion for all known species, Zetka added proudly. This is ... Lisa paused, searching for the right words. This is very different from my last job. Different how? Unit 7742 asked. His mechanical head tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow managed to convey genuine curiosity. Lisa thought about the Galactic Research Institute, where human and alien researchers worked in separate sections and only met for formal presentations. We never socialized. We barely spoke except about work. I never knew if any of my alien colleagues had families. That seems inefficient, Unit 7742 observed. How did you coordinate research approaches without understanding each other's cultural motivations? We ... didn't really, Lisa admitted. Everyone just worked on their assigned piece of the project and hoped it would fit together at the end. Zefka's blue skin shifted to a deeper shade, which Lisa was learning meant he was confused. But how did you achieve breakthrough innovations without combining different perspectives? We mostly didn't, Lisa said quietly. Most projects took years longer than expected, and the results were usually just small improvements on existing knowledge. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Lisa, want to see something cool? Show her the translation project, Zef. Zefka activated a small device in the center of the table. Immediately, the air above it filled with a holographic display showing what looked like sound waves in different colors. This is our Universal Translation Protocol, Zefka explained. We've been working on it for 6 months. 6 months? Lisa stared at the display. The Galactic Research Institute has been trying to create universal translation for 15 years. The difference is approach, Unit 7742 said. Traditional methods attempt to create direct word-to-word conversions between languages. This fails because it ignores emotional and cultural context. Exactly, Sarah said, getting excited. So, instead of just translating words, we're translating intentions and feelings. Zef taught us how Altarians use color shifts in their speech to convey emotion. Unit 7742 showed us how assembly logic patterns can identify the core meaning behind any statement. And I contributed human understanding of subtext and implied meaning. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Zefka added, his skin brightening with what Lisa now knew was happiness. What source? Lisa asked. Children, Sarah said with a grin. My son Jake was playing with Zef's daughter. and Unit 7742's learning subroutines last month. We watched them figure out how to communicate even though they spoke different languages. Kids don't worry about being perfectly correct. They just focus on understanding what the other person is trying to share. So we redesigned the entire protocol based on how children naturally learn to communicate, Zetka said. The results have been remarkable. Lisa felt a familiar excitement building in her chest. This was the kind of breakthrough that could change everything. Have you tested it with other species? 17 different species so far. Unit 7742 reported. Success rate is 94% for basic communication, 87% for complex technical discussions. That's incredible, Lisa breathed. How long before it's ready for general use? We're hoping to have the first version finished in 2 more months, Sarah said. Director Chun wants to present it to the Galactic Council as proof that integrated research teams can achieve things that separate teams cannot. Over the following days, Lisa began to understand the true scope of what David had created at Stellar Dynamics. Project after project showed the same pattern. Human researchers working closely with aliens, sharing not just technical knowledge, but personal experiences, cultural insights, and emotional understanding. The medical scanning project that Dr. Carter had mentioned was making progress because the team included a human doctor who understood how fear affected patient behavior, an Altarian healer who knew how their species processed pain differently, and an assembly medical unit that could analyze biological data without being influenced by preconceptions about what was normal. Another team was developing new space propulsion systems by combining human intuition about physics with alien mathematical approaches and assembly computational power. They had achieved energy efficiency improvements that the traditional research institute said were impossible. But what impressed Lisa most was a project led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a young woman who had brought her 6-year-old daughter to work every day for the past month while her husband was away on a research mission. "Lisa, come see this," Elena called out one afternoon. She was working in a lab filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. "Maria, show Dr. Martinez what you discovered." Elena's daughter, a small girl with bright eyes and dirt under her fingernails, led Lisa to a table covered with various alien plants. "See this one?" Maria pointed to a purple plant with silver leaves. "It's from the vegan system. And this one is from Earth." She pointed to a common fern. "Mom says they can't grow together because they need different types of soil." "That's right," Elena said. "Different chemical compositions, different nutrients." "But look," Maria said, leading Lisa to another table. Here, the 2 plants were growing side by side in the same pot, both looking healthy and strong. I mixed the soils together, but I also added earthworms from Mom's garden. Lisa looked closer. The earthworms were moving through the soil, and everywhere they went, both plants seemed to thrive. The worms are breaking down the nutrients and making them available to both plants, Elena explained, her voice filled with excitement. "Maria figured out that we don't need to find common ground between species. We need to find the right intermediary that can help them share resources. This could revolutionize agricultural projects on mixed-species colonies," Lisa said in amazement. "The idea came from watching Maria play with her friends from different species," Elena said. "She noticed that they don't always understand each other directly, but they can communicate through shared activities. The earthworms are like shared activities for plants." That evening, Lisa sat in her quarters with Danny, helping him with his homework. The assignment was about different alien cultures, something that would have been unthinkable at most human schools. "Mom," Danny said, looking up from his tablet, "why do the other research places not like families?" Lisa thought about how to explain it in terms an 8-year-old could understand. "They think that caring about families makes scientists less focused on their work," Danny frowned. "But that's silly. When I was sick and you brought me to your old job, you worked extra hard because you cared about me and your team." Lisa felt a warm glow in her chest. Her son had understood something that most of the galaxy's scientific institutions had missed. "You're right," she said. "And that's why this place is special." Director Chun figured out that when people have something important to protect and care about, they work harder and think better. Like how I'm better at school when I know you're proud of me? Exactly like that. Danny went back to his homework, but Lisa continued thinking about their conversation. In just 1 week, she had seen more genuine scientific breakthroughs than she had witnessed in years at traditional institutions. The secret wasn't advanced technology or bigger budgets. It was something much simpler and much more human. It was the understanding that scientists weren't just thinking machines, but people with hearts and families and emotions. When those emotions were included in the work instead of suppressed, they became a source of strength and creativity rather than distraction. Lisa looked out her window at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there? The message arrived on a Tuesday morning while Lisa was having breakfast with Danny in their quarters. Her tablet chimed with an urgent priority signal, the kind that meant official business from the Galactic Council. Lisa's stomach tightened as she opened the message. All research facilities conducting xenobiology projects are hereby notified of a formal challenge issued by the Traditional Research Alliance. A competitive research trial will be conducted to determine the most effective methodologies for addressing critical galactic scientific problems. Danny looked up from his cereal. "Mom, you look worried again." Lisa forced a smile. "It's just work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." But privately, Lisa was very worried. The Traditional Research Alliance was a group of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful research institutions, including the Galactic Research Institute where she used to work. If they were issuing formal challenges, it meant they saw stellar dynamics as a threat. An hour later, Lisa sat in David's office along with the other senior researchers. David's face was serious as he read through the full challenge document on his desk screen. "They want a head-to-head competition," David said. "One problem, 2 teams, winner takes all." "What's the problem?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim. David's expression grew even more grave. "The Kepler Plague." A silence fell over the room. Everyone knew about the Kepler Plague. It was a mysterious disease that had appeared 3 years ago, affecting multiple species across 17 different star systems. Traditional research teams had been working on it since the beginning with no success. How many people had died? "So far?" Lisa asked quietly. "The latest reports say over 2 million, David replied. "And it's spreading to new systems every month. The Galactic Council is desperate for a solution." Dr. Elena Rodriguez shifted in her chair. "What exactly are the terms of this challenge?" David scrolled through the document. "Each team gets 6 months to develop a treatment or cure. We can use any methods we want, but we have to present our results to the Galactic Council at the end. The winning approach becomes the official protocol for all future research projects." "And if we lose?" asked Dr. Alex Carter. "If we lose, Stellar Dynamics will be disbanded. All family-integrated research programs will be shut down. The Council will declare our methods unsafe and ineffective." Lisa felt her heart sink. Everything they had built here, all the breakthroughs they had achieved, could disappear if they failed this one test. "Who's leading the traditional team?" Sarah asked. "Director Kane from the Galactic Research Institute," David said, "along with representatives from the Zentari Science Collective, the Assembly Research Network, and the Altarian Medical Academy." Lisa's hands clenched in her lap. Kane was the man who had fired her for bringing Danny to work. He had always believed that emotions and personal relationships had no place in serious science. "That's not fair," Elena said. "They have 4 major institutions working together. We're just one research station." "Actually," David said, "that might be our advantage. There are 4 separate institutions trying to coordinate. We're one integrated team." "Still," Alex said, "the Kepler Plague has stumped every research team that's tried to solve it. What makes us think we can succeed where others have failed?" David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Because we approach problems differently. Traditional teams look at the plague as a purely biological problem. They study the organism, they test chemicals, they try to find ways to kill it or stop it. And that's not the right approach. Lisa asked. It might be part of the right approach, David said, turning back to face them. But I think there's something they're missing. The plague doesn't just affect bodies. It affects communities, families, the social structures that hold civilizations together. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? Look at the pattern of how it spreads, David said, activating a holographic display that showed the affected star systems. It doesn't follow normal disease transmission routes. It jumps between systems that have strong trade relationships, military alliances, or cultural exchanges. Lisa studied the display. You're saying it spreads through social connections? I'm saying it spreads through the bonds between people and between communities, David said. Traditional research teams see those bonds as irrelevant to the biological problem. But what if the bonds are part of the problem? Or more importantly, what if they're part of the solution? Elena leaned forward. You want us to study the social aspects of the plague, not just the biological ones. I want us to study everything, David said. The biology, the sociology, the psychology, the family structures of affected populations. I want us to understand not just how the plague works, but why it works. The traditional teams won't understand that approach, Alex said. They'll see it as unscientific. Let them, David replied. We're not trying to impress them. We're trying to save lives. Over the following days, word of the challenge spread throughout the station. The competitive trial wasn't just about research methods anymore. It had become a symbol of two completely different ways of thinking about science and life. Lisa noticed the change in atmosphere almost immediately. People were more focused, more determined, but they weren't stressed or anxious the way she would have expected. Instead, they seemed energized by the idea of proving that their way of doing things could make a real difference. Mom, Danny said one evening while they were having dinner in the community center, everyone's talking about the big test. Are you worried about it? Lisa asked. Danny considered this seriously. A little bit, but mostly I'm excited. Excited? Yeah. If we win, then other kids will get to live on research stations with their parents too. And if we lose ... Danny shrugged. Well, at least we tried to help people. Lisa looked around the community center. Children from multiple species were playing together while their parents discussed research strategies. Families were sharing meals and ideas with equal enthusiasm. This wasn't just a workplace that tolerated families. It was a community that had been built around the idea that science and family could make each other stronger. The next morning, Lisa found herself in a planning meeting with the core research team. David had assembled a group of 20 scientists from 12 different species, along with support staff, data analysts, and even some of the older children who had shown aptitude for scientific thinking. The traditional team will focus on biological analysis, David said. They'll try to understand the plague organism itself, develop targeted treatments, maybe create a vaccine. And our approach? Lisa asked. We're going to study the plague as a community problem, David said. We'll look at how it affects family structures, social networks, economic systems. We'll examine not just who gets sick, but how communities respond to illness. That's a lot of ground to cover in 6 months, Sarah pointed out. Which is why we're going to work differently than they do, David said. Traditional teams compartmentalize. Each specialist works on their piece in isolation. We're going to work as one integrated team where everyone contributes to every aspect of the problem. Elena raised her hand. What about our families? Will they be involved? David smiled. Elena, your 6-year-old daughter figured out how to make incompatible plants grow together. Do you really think we should exclude insights like that from the most important research project in galactic history? Lisa felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried before, solving a galactic crisis using the same principles of family, community, and emotional connection that had made Stellar Dynamics successful. It was a huge risk. If they failed, everything they had built would be destroyed. But if they succeeded, they would prove once and for all that human values weren't weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. As the meeting broke up and people began heading to their assignments, Lisa caught David's arm. "David," she said quietly, "what if we're wrong? What if the traditional approach really is better for something this serious?" David looked at her with the same serious expression she remembered from the 8-year-old boy who had accidentally triggered a containment protocol. "Lisa," he said, "the traditional approach has had 3 years to solve this problem. 2 million people have died while the galaxy's best scientists followed the same methods they've always used. Maybe it's time to try something different. Even if it means risking everything we've built here." "Especially then," David said. "Because if we're not willing to risk what we've built to help people who are suffering, then we've forgotten why we built it in the first place." Lisa nodded, feeling her resolve strengthen. Tomorrow, they will begin the most important research project of their lives, not just for Stellar Dynamics, but for every family in the galaxy that had been torn apart by the plague. They had 6 months to prove that love, community, and human compassion could succeed where cold logic and separation had failed. The real test was about to begin. 6 months later, Lisa stood in the main conference room of the Galactic Council headquarters, her hands trembling slightly as she watched representatives from hundreds of worlds file into their seats. Today was the day both teams would present their solutions to the Kepler plague. Everything they had worked for came down to the next few hours. Director Kane sat at the traditional team's table, looking confident and composed. Behind him were displays showing months of detailed biological analysis, chemical formulas, and test results. Their presentation materials were perfect, organized, and thoroughly professional. At the Stellar Dynamics table, David sat quietly reviewing his notes. Their presentation materials looked very different. Along with scientific data, they had family photos, children's drawings, and what appeared to be personal stories written by plague survivors. Danny, now 9 years old, sat in the observation section with other family members. He gave Lisa a small wave and a thumbs up. Next to him sat Maria Rodriguez, who had helped discover the plant symbiosis solution, and several other children whose insights had contributed to their research. The Galactic Council chairman, a tall being from the Centauri system, called the session to order. "We are here today to evaluate 2 approaches to solving the Kepler plague crisis," the chairman announced. "The traditional research method will present first, followed by the integrated family research method. Each team has 1 hour to present their findings." Director Kane stood up and activated his team's presentation. The holographic displays filled with detailed molecular structures and complex mathematical equations. "Honorable Council members," Kane began, "over the past 6 months, our team has conducted the most comprehensive biological analysis of the Kepler plague organism ever attempted. We have identified its genetic structure, mapped its reproduction cycle, and developed a targeted antiviral treatment." Kane's presentation was impressive. His team had discovered how the plague organism attacks cellular structures in different species. They had created several promising chemical treatments that could slow or stop the infection in laboratory conditions. "Our proposed treatment shows an 82% success rate in controlled laboratory environments," Kane concluded. "We recommend immediate mass production and distribution to all affected systems." The council members nodded approvingly. Kane's approach was exactly what they expected from serious scientific research: thorough, logical, and focused on measurable results. When Kane finished, the chairman turned to David. "The Integrated Family Research Team may now present their findings." David stood up, but instead of immediately starting his presentation, he walked to the center of the room. "Council members," David said, "before I begin, I want to ask you a question. How many of you lost someone to the Kepler plague?" Several hands went up around the room. David nodded solemnly. Our team began this research with a different question than the traditional team. Instead of asking, how do we kill the plague organism, we asked, why are people dying? David activated their presentation, and the first image that appeared was not a molecular structure, but a photograph of a family from the vegan system. This is the Colvin family, David said. They lost their youngest child to the plague 8 months ago. But here's what's interesting. Only the child died. The parents and older siblings all recovered completely. The image changed to show dozens of similar family photos. This pattern appeared in every affected system. Children and elderly family members died at much higher rates than adults in their prime. The traditional teens assumed this was because of weaker immune systems, but we discovered something else. Lisa stood up from her table. We found that the plague doesn't just attack bodies. It attacks the bonds between people. The organism feeds on the stress hormones produced when families are separated or when people lose hope. The council chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Kane frowned and stood up. That's ridiculous, Kane said. Diseases are biological, not emotional. You can't treat an infection with feelings. You're right, David said calmly. You can't treat an infection with feelings alone. But you also can't treat a community disease with individual medicine alone. David activated the next part of their presentation. Our team discovered that the plague spreads fastest in communities where family units have been broken apart. Refugee camps, military deployments, research stations where workers are separated from their families. The image showed a map of plague transmission routes. The pattern was clear. The disease spread along paths of social disruption and family separation. The organism has evolved to exploit social stress, Lisa explained. When people are isolated or grieving, their bodies produce chemical signals that help the plague reproduce. But when people are surrounded by strong family and community support, those same chemical signals change. Which brings us to our solution. David said got the presentation changed to show video recordings from the past month. Children could be seen playing with recovering plague patients. Families were gathered around hospital beds, sharing meals and stories. We don't just treat the infection, David said. We treat the community. When families stay together during treatment, when communities support their sick members, when children continue to play and laugh around their recovering relatives, the plague organism cannot reproduce effectively. Kane stood up again, looking angry. This is not science. You're suggesting that hugs and family dinners can cure a deadly disease. No, Lisa said, stepping forward. We're suggesting that hugs and family dinners create the biological conditions that make medical treatment effective. Your antiviral drug much better when patients aren't stressed and isolated. David activated the final part of their presentation. We tested our community treatment approach in 12 different systems over the past 3 months. The results speak for themselves. The holographic display showed recovery statistics that made several council members gasp. Systems that had implemented community treatment protocols showed 96% recovery rates. Systems using only traditional medical treatment showed 53% recovery rates. But the most important result isn't in the numbers, David said. It's in what happens to communities after the plague is gone. The final images show thriving communities where families had stayed together during the crisis. Children were healthy and happy. Elderly people were active and engaged. Communities were stronger than they had been before the plague struck. Traditional treatment saves lives, David said. Community treatment saves civilizations. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, the chairman spoke. These results are ... unexpected. Dr. Kane, do you have a response? Kane looked at the data displays, his face pale. The biological analysis is sound, he admitted reluctantly. I don't understand the mechanism, but the results are undeniable. The mechanism is simple, said a small voice from the observation section. Everyone turned to see Danny standing up. When people are scared and alone, their bodies fight against themselves. When people feel safe and loved, their bodies fight against the germs. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched her son explain what the galaxy's greatest scientists had missed. Sometimes, Danny continued, the most important medicine is just making sure people know they're not alone. The chairman looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. I believe we have our answer. The integrated family research approach has demonstrated superior results. From this day forward, all galactic research institutions will be required to consider community and family factors in their work. Kane stood up stiffly. This decision will change everything about how we conduct scientific research. Yes, the chairman replied. It will. As the council session ended and delegates began to file out, Lisa found herself surrounded by representatives from dozens of worlds. They all wanted to know how to implement community treatment protocols in their own systems. David appeared at her side, smiling broadly. Ready to teach the galaxy a new way to do science? Lisa looked around at all the eager faces, then back at the observation section where Danny was talking animatedly with the other children about their adventure. Actually, she said, I think the galaxy is ready to teach itself. We just needed to remember that the best discoveries happen when we stop trying to separate science from the things that make us human. 20 years later, Lisa stood in the parlor. Same observation deck where she and David had first talked about changing galactic science. The view outside had changed dramatically. Dozens of research stations now orbited nearby stars, all built on the family integrated model that had started. At Stellar Dynamics. Danny, now 39 years old and a respected researcher in his own right, joined her at the window. His own 8-year-old daughter was in the school section of the station, learning about xenobiology alongside children from 17 different species. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mrs. Coleman hadn't fallen that day? Danny asked. Lisa smiled and put her arm around her son. If Mrs. Coleman hadn't fallen, you wouldn't have come to work with me. If you hadn't come to work with me, David wouldn't have learned that science and family can make each other stronger. If David hadn't learned that lesson, we never would have solved the plague crisis. So Mrs. Coleman's accident saved the galaxy? No,